Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Exploring the unexplained,
breaking down barriers,
putting the macabre under the microscope,
dissecting the disturbing,
seeking out the sinister,
bringing you the jinkies and the jump scares. Hey guys, welcome back to Freaky Fridays with me, Devin, and my co-host,
me, Megan.
Today we've got a really cool episode lined up. We're going to be talking about just some of like the basic starter equipment if you want to get into paranormal investigation.
Yeah, tools of the trade, and just that you have an idea of what we're talking about whenever we're talking about ghost hunting, and the things that you are actually able to capture.
Yeah, no, because also a lot of them have like weird nicknames and like abbreviations, so
it can get really confusing really fast.
Yeah, so we've lined up basically a lot of the equipment that we've used in our investigations and then some of the stuff that we'd really like to use.
And yeah, we can chat about exactly what we thought about the things that we used.
Yeah, give you guys a little review if you're looking into buying some of this equipment yourself, because it can get quite pricey and you sort of want to know what you're getting yourself into when you decide to purchase it. And basically what we decided to do was put it in order of importance in our opinions. Like, if you only had the option to take one thing, we'd suggest you start at the top of the list with us.
So, at the beginning, first and foremost, you're going to need a camera. It's one of the most basic function tools of every investigation. It can pick up your audio and your video. It'll probably end up picking up a lot more than you are ever aware of until you're going back through your footage. That's what happened to us, at least. They can be used for not only detecting paranormal activity, but also for just documenting the whole process of your investigation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's nice to also just have documentation of your process and what you do when you go and investigate, and you can sort of pick up on things that worked for you, things that didn't work for you, and sort of adapt the way you investigate from that.
Exactly. And there are a number of different types of cameras out there, each serving their own different purpose. Digital, with the modern age, digital cameras are probably your easiest to use nowadays. Yeah. You can just transfer your high quality photos and clips directly to your computer. It saves time, it saves money. The drawbacks to a lot of digital cameras are that they're not flexible. Their settings are normally fixed, and some of them may have long periods between when they take pictures.
Yeah.
Other cameras can be modified to see further into the light spectrum than what we see with our eyes, which is generally what you're going to try and go for when ghost hunting.
Yeah, and I mean, when we did our documentary, what we went for was a 4K night vision GoPro, yeah,
with an RO light.
Yeah, so if you're going to use a night vision camera, which we suggest you do, you're going to need an IR light, which enables the camera to operate in night vision, essentially.
Exactly. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got your infrared, which is your IR, while on the opposite end is your ultraviolet. So through adjusting and removing filters on cameras, or just on certain cameras, you have those as settings. You can modify to see, like I said, deeper into either end of these spectrums. That conversion's normally called full spectrum.
Yeah,
which is what we had.
Yeah, and I mean, you can, for as far as I know, you can take your average camera and sort of, if you're brave enough, take it apart and fix it so that it is full spectrum.
Yeah, there definitely are sort of do-it-yourself ways to do it. You just do need a good knowledge of what you are doing so you don't break your stuff.
Yeah, there are YouTube videos out there. It literally depends on how brave you are. We were not that brave. We actually ordered ours from Ghost Stop, I believe, which is a fantastic online store for ghost hunting equipment. They're reasonably priced. Like I said, most investigation equipment is quite pricey, but they're reasonably priced. They're great with answering your questions and delivering stuff on time. So if you're looking to get anything, I would suggest checking them out.
And I mean, this equipment's also so specialized for what you're doing. I guess the cost covers what you're getting out of it most of the time.
Yeah, and those guys know what they're doing. A lot of their stuff they do themselves, and it's very professional.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, you'd never say so getting the equipment. It doesn't look like a hack job that's sort of been like, welded together. It's really professional looking.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah, we got a lot of our stuff from them.
So, yeah, attached to the camera, like we mentioned, you need your IR light. A lot of lighting sources can actually come with attachments to hook onto your camera. Others will maybe need some tripod mounts.
I think it depends on the size, and obviously the bigger your IR light, the further it's going to...
Exactly. And yeah, you need to also just determine the kinds of lighting sources you want throughout your investigation. Generally, having bright white lights all around and having the lights on kills just the whole atmosphere of it and distracts the investigators. So that's why that's generally opted out.
Yeah, you want to, personal preference, and I think for a lot of paranormal investigators, is you want to be operating in the dark as much as possible. So that's why we think, a full spectrum night vision camera is the way to go.
Exactly.
I will say though, with the 4K GoPro that we had, the footage during the daytime when we weren't using the IR light was a bit off.
It was. I think its main purpose is specified for sort of during the night shoots.
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend using that for your daytime stuff.
Yeah, it's generally why you'll have maybe more than one camera. Like I said, each camera's got their own specific purpose. So you'll have maybe your daytime general B-roll kind of footage, and then you'll have your investigation through the night.
Which is what we did,
Exactly.
But then I think the second most important piece of equipment, as far as I'm concerned, is an EVP recorder.
Definitely.
Yeah, because I feel like we obviously said your most important piece would be a camera, and if you're not going to get visual evidence, you at least want to have the audio evidence.
Definitely, and so much of our evidence was audio.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our greatest pieces of evidence was we were using the EVP recorder, and one of our team members asked a question. I think it was, "What is your name?" And we literally, clear as day.
There's no denying you hearing it.
Yeah, we got the name John.
John, yes.
It just sounded like someone straight up saying John.
Yeah, that was definitely one of our clearest.
Yeah, so you're gonna, I think the second most important piece of equipment that you can have in your arsenal is an EVP recorder.
So just to describe that a bit, in ghost hunting, EVP generally stands for electronic voice phenomena. They are sounds found on electronic recordings that are interpreted as spirit voices, essentially.
Yeah.
They've been unintentionally recorded in a lot of cases, or intentionally requested when you are asking questions and actually trying to get a response out.
Yeah, and as far as I know, the EVP recorder can pick up on a lot of stuff that we can't hear just with our ears.
It definitely picks up on a range of auditory tracks that human ears cannot hear.
And it's also just a great way to, like I said, document stuff just in general during your investigation.
It's part of your investigation. It's just it's a journal of everything you've gone through and experienced.
It's essentially like taking the minutes of a meeting,
It really is.
Just in the paranormal world.
EVPs also don't require additional energy, known as white noise, which spirit boxes do.
Yeah.
So they're far more sort of elusive to capture spirit voices on.
Yeah.
They can be quite clear, but many sounds actually come through like hoarse whispers. It's definitely you need to develop an ear for picking up these things. It's not quite what you would expect always.
Yeah, it's not crystal clear like I'm talking to you right now. It is usually more like a whisper.
Or it can be soft and far away. Sometimes, actually a lot of the time, the voices you pick up are unintelligible.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there are plenty of times where I've gotten EVPs and not known what they're saying, but it's definitely a voice.
Exactly that.
You have to sit there and listen to it 800 times.
And have different opinions on it, and yeah.
I mean, while we're on the topic of EVPs, I think a really great tip for anyone who's sort of diving into it for the first time is while you're recording, if you are shuffling your feet or moving around, it's important to tag that in your recording and say moving or shuffling, just so that when you're playing it back later, you know what's paranormal and what isn't.
Exactly. Yeah, you need to document that stuff. And people have actually classified the different types of EVPs you get into 3 classification groups. So classification A are really clear and distinct voices or sounds, and they universally accepted, like everyone around you is on the same page of what's being said or understood. It's also understandable without the use of headphones.
Okay.
I know that for a lot of hours, they were clear, but you needed headphones to hear properly.
I think in the final edit of the film, we actually left a lot of EVP evidence out because it was
that
only...
purpose alone, exactly.
Yeah.
It was quite heartbreaking. So that would be classification B, where it's a voice or sound that is distinct and fairly loud, but you do need to hear it through headphones. Actually, this class can be heard by a lot of people if they are told what to listen for.
Yeah.
So you can hear something if it's just played to you, but if somebody says, "Do you hear this?" then it becomes more audible. I know a lot of the time, actually, you try and avoid doing that just to see if people are picking up on the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to influence people with evidence. You want to see if they arrive at the same conclusion.
Yeah, you never want to tell them what to expect or what you think it is. You want them to like confirm it for you.
Exactly. And then last classification to see, that's a faint or hoarse whispery voice or sound that can barely be heard, and it's usually unintelligible.
I feel like for me, that type of evidence I would sort of throw away evidence.
That's funny because most investigators do disregard that class.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like when you're gathering evidence, you want something that's pretty concrete.
Exactly. You're already going up against an audience that's really skeptical and ready to tear apart the things you've collected. So definitely go in with your strongest evidence. Exactly.
And I think we got our recorder from a place called Ghost Hunters Store or Ghost Hunters Shop. They're also an online store. And the only problem I had with ours is you could not transfer the files from the recorder itself to the computer.
Exactly. Like with the ease of, say, digital devices where it's that easy copy over from one device to another, this was not that. Yeah,
so I think if you decide to go get your own EVP recorder, make sure it's capable of transferring your files, because there were many a time where we would sit in a booth recording from our EVP recorder into the microphone and then having to basically recreate the file.
Exactly. It's quite a mission.
Yeah. But moving on, we're going to talk about one of my personal favorite pieces of equipment, which is the SP7 Spirit Box. So
the Spirit Box is a compact tool that we use for attempting to communicate with paranormal entities. They're designed to specifically capture voices of spirits.
Yeah. It basically uses radio channels or frequencies. It goes through them really, really fast.
Yeah, so they rapidly switch between radio stations, and that sort of static white noise creates more energy, which allows the spirits to break through more easily.
Spirit voice.
I will have to say I had to get used to that. The first time we played it's so distracting and so loud, and you don't think there's any possible way you can hear anything through that. But it does. Eventually, you get used to it, and
and a lot of people argue what if you're just hitting a radio station and you're hearing the host's voice? And the thing is, it sweeps so rapidly through those radio stations that it's impossible for any word or sentence to get through from an actual live radio station.
And I mean, there is actually also things to help you with that, like the Faraday pouch.
Yes, we actually, when we ordered our SP7 Spirit Box, also got it with a Faraday pouch, which is basically just like a little cotton pouch that you can pop it into that stops any interference.
Yeah, it really reduces and blocks interference from FM and AM radio signals. And you simply place your ghost or spirit box inside the pouch along with your external speaker, and that's it. It just blocks out, sometimes depending on how you place it in, but it does a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. But speaking of having to attach a speaker, that to me was really important, because you can hear it without a speaker, but it's very, very soft.
Exactly. No, it is.
So if you're gonna, splurge and get yourself an SB7 Spirit box, consider getting yourself a little speaker to attach to it.
And yeah, that's a whole really interesting process, because you can pose questions and sometimes you'll get answers with a word or a phrase.
Yeah, like sometimes a whole sentence, which is like...
That's incredible when that happens, because you, like you said, you realize it's sweeping so fast and that's lasting through all of those sweeps, so...
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's, like I said, one of my favorite pieces of equipment. I just think it's phenomenal, and the evidence you can get from it is crazy. And then the next one we're moving on to, I believe Megan likes a lot.
I do.
And that is an EMF meter.
Yeah, so EMF meters, for people who don't know, that's electromagnetic
Field?
Yeah. They measure fluctuations in electromagnetic energy and fields, and they are usually a direct result of electronic voice appliances in homes, and that can be cell phones, power lines, anything sort of just giving off some electricity and just those fields. So those will be detected by your EMF meter. But the reason it's used in paranormal investigations is that entities can manipulate these fields in their attempt to manifest themselves and interacting with our world.
Yeah, so I mean, what we usually did, and I know a lot of other investigators do, is you do a general sweep of the area that you're investigating with your EMF meter, just to see, what the actual electronics in the house read at, so that when you get a hit later on in your investigation, you can debunk whether it's something that's in the house or whether it's actually paranormal.
Exactly. That's really important to establish first off and firsthand. If there's any specific sources giving off. That actually almost caught us once when we got a lot of readings off of a mannequin in this dress.
Yeah, in the museum.
Exactly. Only to later find out there was a plug source right behind it.
Yeah, that was a little embarrassing.
It was.
We were all running this EMF meter up and down this dress thinking it's like got an attachment or something, and it ended up being a plug.
Exactly.
Great stuff. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something. Carry on. You have something to say.
You actually get different kinds of EMF meters. You get single axis EMF meters, and they measure fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, but specifically in one direction depending on where you're holding it. And then you get tri-field meters, and those will measure in each of the axes, so you're getting measurements all around you.
I did not actually know that, and I'm embarrassed to admit it. But that's very interesting. Thank you. But also another great way to use EMF meters is you can also ask questions, which I think we did a couple of times, where you sort of say, like, beep the EMF meter once for yes, twice for no.
Well, that is what petrified me. The first bit of response I ever got from a spirit, and that was in Katie's card room, as we mentioned previously. It's quite jarring and alarming when you first hear it, but yeah, it's also, like you said, it's really effective. We got some of our best responses in that way.
Yeah, for sure. So it sort of doubles up as two pieces of equipment in one, which makes it worth adding to your list of investigation equipment. But yeah, those are just the ones that we've used on our investigations, but I know for both of us there are pieces of equipment that we've seen online or seen in shows that we would love to use at some point. I know Megan's is really, really interesting.
Yeah, the SLS. I know the SLS camera would both fascinate me endlessly, but also absolutely terrify me when I see the results. So the SLS camera was actually first used on Ghost Adventures, and it was a device made by Bill Chappell. Basically what happens is the camera detects human shapes in absolute darkness or in full light. It sees bodies where there is nothing to see with the naked eye.
Yeah, so it almost like tracks them in almost like a skeletal...
Exactly, like the Kinect that we use for gaming. It's exactly the same principles. It uses an RGB camera with a depth sensor, and infrared light projector, and a monochrome CMOS sensor. So that sees everything not as a flat image, but as dots in a three-dimensional environment. And those thousands of infrared dots allow the camera to sort of see depth and detail, basically like a sonar.
Wow.
So the software used with the SLS camera then can recognize people by distinguishing body parts and joints and movements. And that is how it will then show if you suddenly see a person show up on your screen that the eye cannot see, then that means there's something there that the IR is detecting and that the program recognizes as a human shape based on just body parts and joints.
Yeah, sometimes inhuman as well. I know I've seen a couple episodes of shows where you get these weird, like...
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Animalistic.
Like, absolutely really weird things. So like I said, that would be such a really cool piece of equipment to have, because you've got really distinct evidence right there in front of you that something's being detected that you're not seeing. But it would absolutely terrify me as well.
But I feel like it's also really great for if you are sensing something. It's a great way to confirm that. Yeah. So I would also love to use the SLS one day. Bill Chappell is an absolute master when it comes to like groundbreaking new equipment. So.
He definitely is.
And fun fact, he's apparently a skeptic of the paranormal.
Well, that would actually make sense why he's then trying to invent all this equipment to prove.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually a really cool fact about him, is he's a skeptic, but he's developing all this really cool equipment to, you know, prove the existence of the paranormal. But for me, to this day, I've never used this piece of equipment, but I am determined to one day use it. I would love to use a thermal imaging camera.
Yeah, that would also yield some really cool results.
Yeah, for me personally, some of my best evidence that I've seen, around the world has been caught on thermal imaging, which basically measures the heat, the temperature of the things around you. So it's basically a camera, but it's
picking up on all the heat signatures that are coming off of all the objects within a room or an environment.
Yeah, so you can see everything, but very much like the SLS, it can pick up on fluctuations in temperature. So if there's a paranormal entity there that's registering as really cold or really hot, it can appear on the thermal imaging camera. And that to me is so freaking cool, you know.
And then when you use this equipment in conjunction with one another, it's just like, it's a really nice way to solidify the things you find. Yeah,
no, for sure.
There are a lot of other pieces of equipment that investigators will maybe use. I know there's like the laser grid.
We did use the laser grid once. It came as, we got a lot of our equipment from Ghost Stop, and then we actually got a kit which had a lot of the stuff in, and one of the things that came in the kit was a laser grid. And personally, worst piece of equipment I've ever used.
There's a lot of faults with the way that was thought out. But let's just to explain to you how it works. They normally use to define a shape when movement happens, whether or not it has some kind of mass to it.
So you like project the laser out, and anything that crosses it sort of...
Exactly. They recommend that you place a laser grid in front of any rolling camera that you have, and upon review, if any movement happens, it will be obviously an apparent, and by breaking the laser pattern.
No, I think as a piece of equipment in general, it's great to capture evidence, but... The only problem with ours is that you had to constantly hold the button down.
Yeah, that was the whole problem. Yeah. It was handheld, so you were constantly. It was never steady. It was never still. yeah, like you said, you had to hold the button down the entire time, so it wasn't like we could leave that running.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're interested in buying a laser grid to test out in your paranormal investigation adventures, get one that you can just turn on and off without having to hold the button down, and you know, you might get something great. We just didn't have the greatest experience.
No, not personally.
But yeah, to wrap up, that was basically our comprehensive list of some of the best equipment you can use starting off as a paranormal investigator.
Yeah, and it'll help you hopefully pick up on things that you would never have imagined. Also, all the things happening around you that you are unaware of until well after the time.
Exactly. But you guys can join us next week. We have a really exciting episode that I am super amped for. We're going to be talking about our ideal locations to investigate. And I know I could talk about mine for a year, so tune in for that. And good luck on your paranormal investigation adventures now that you have a comprehensive guide. Freaky Fridays, hosted by Devin Beatty
and Megan Portnoy, and produced with the generous assistance of Janu Blau
and Blended Podcasts.
Brought to you by Blended Audio.